What's up YouTube, Dell here from Zephyr, and today I am bringing you an update to Budget Fire King Tribrigade, or I like to call it Fire Brigade. I think it works out quite nicely. So, if you want to see a Dogmatica version of this deck, which is an updated budget version, get the video above 50 likes and I will bring that for you. With all of that out of the way, I'm going to dive headfirst into the profile, show you exactly what we've got, and talk about the updates we've made. I'll also show you again a demo side deck at the end of the video as well, so you have more of an idea of what you kind of want to be putting in. I'll even take you through the certain types and scenarios that you'll be putting in these particular side cards. So with all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell, and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more upcoming content. So no surprise here, we are of course going to be playing triple Legendary Fire King Ponix. You're going to want to max out on it. You could arguably cut it down to 2 if you wanted to, but it is very, very risky. You're better off running that chance of opening up multiples just so you have a fire card to destroy rather than not seeing it at all. Then of course we do have triple High Avatar Kirin. I learnt my lesson the second that I tried this back at 2 ages ago when the deck first came out. I was like, yep, nope, going straight back up to 3. Such a good card. The targeted protection, or like the targeting dodge ability, is very, very important. And then its destruction effect is insane. 2 of the Garunics, pretty straightforward and simple on that one. The 1 Advatar and of course the 1 Barong. I would say that this is the base minimum of what you'd be looking for the lineup for your Fire Kings. Moving on to the Tribrigades, pretty straightforward and simple on this one as well. Triple Fractal. This one I'm trialing out double kit. Now the reason I'm trying out double kit is you can destroy it in the deck with your Garunics, which is very, very nice. The only time it benefits you opening up a kit is if you don't have another fire monster that you want to destroy in the hand. Something like a Ponix, which more times than not you've normal summoned it to get to your Fire King Island. So you'd probably want to pop the Ponix unless you want to keep it on the board, which is doable. It does come up a couple of times, but I thought I'd try it out with 2 kit. There are some very niche scenarios where you would open up a kit and you're like, yeah, okay, I can work with this and still make it work. But I kind of felt like, you know what if I cut the kit down 1? Let's increase the Nerval and see how I feel about that. And the reason I quite like this is because you're going to be able to recycle most of these cards very easily. And then it's very easy to get a Nerval search off when you've activated a card like Revolt in order to kind of get you to the rest of your Tribrigade engine to start off again. Now, the one big difference that this will have in comparison to the pure version that I showed you the other day is the fact that the pure version literally just has one route of play. It's all through the Fire Kings and then it falls back on the hand traps, whereas with this you have more gas, as I mentioned in that profile, about how you can bait out more interactions, how you can play through more interactions and kind of go from there, because you have the ability of being able to discard Fractal, leading you into your Tribrigade engine. You also have the ability to special summon out Karaz, and then of course you've got the ability of just banishing from the graveyard in order to kind of spawn you out some very cool link monsters to get you even higher. So that's it for the Tribrigade lineup, not to mention obviously the triple Fire King Tenki. Now, there are some times when you might consider not wanting to play this or cutting it down. Yes, okay, if Draw Unlock Bird is rampant in your local environment, and you'll see 2 cards that I am playing to try and counteract Draw Unlock Bird later on, but the idea is that with Tenki, you basically just have more consistency to get to your Fractal. So you're playing 6 copies of Fractal. If you've already got Fractal, it then becomes 4 copies of Avatar or 4 copies of Barong. Very rare you're going to actually want to search the Barong out, but if you have the ability to get to Ponix as a special summon, and you're like, I want to get a monster protection to protect me from stuff like Nibiru, then of course you do have the ability of being able to go, okay, cool, Tenki into Avatar, normal the Advatar, special out the Ponix in one way or another, and then go from there. On top of that as well, because I am playing the Tenki, I am playing triple original Sinful Spoil Snake Eyes. Now, you don't have to play this card at all. Again, when I first brought this card to people's attentions in this particular type build, it was £2.50 a copy. It is now £5 a copy. I still highly advise that if you are building or playing Fire King on any level, that you have at least one of this card, if not free, especially if you're on a budget. The worst case scenario is you spend £15 on a card that you may and may not be playing at free. Worst case scenario, you're having to pay £15 for a playset, and if you go, right, I only ever really want to play 1, you can then get to £10 back from it. The idea behind Sinful Spoil Snake Eyes is because I'm playing Tenki, I have one of the easiest cards imaginable that I don't mind sending from the board. On top of that as well, if I activate Tenki, search out Fractal, more times than not, if the Droll is running rampant in the local environment, you're probably going to get Drolled at that point, which means your entire Fractal route pretty much becomes dead, because you just activate Fractal, you would send Kit would then send Nerval, and then you're not going to get a search off the back of the Nerval, so all you're really doing is flooding your graveyard with your Tribrigade monsters. Whereas if they do ash it or stop the Tenki, especially if they ash the Tenki, which is very rare, but if they do, you go, okay, cool, Snake Eyes send the Tenki, I know I don't need to worry about ash, Ponix, out we come, and let's go. It can get a little bit bricky, but of course you are going to have multiple ways of getting to Ponix, which is why it also takes away that reliance. Again, a lot of people that are experienced with the Fire King matchup, a lot of people are playing Ghost Belt and a lot of people are playing DD Crow. So they're able to kind of deal with it. More times than not, the DD Crow is going to hit your Barong so you don't get the Kirin search, but sometimes people will actually DD Crow or Bell your Ponix so that it doesn't come back to the hand, you gain that infinite resource, which again, having an additional copy of Sinful Spoil Snake Eyes is always going to be opening up an option. Of course, this then allows you to experiment should you want to go further down the Snake Eyes route. Like I've shown you in other profiles as well, you could start looking into your Snake Eyes Ash, your Flameberg, and even your Snake Eyes Birch if you wanted to go off the back of that combo that I showed you previously, which ultimately ends you into a Decode Talker Heat Soul, and then the ability to loop these guys around. It keeps it on a very tidy budget. The most expensive card here is going to be a secret rare version of the Flameberg at £10 a copy. I believe it's kind of creeped up a little bit to 12, but a lot of people that I have seen, when they've got the Snake Eyes engine, is they go, oh, right, Bonfire is now £60 a copy, £70 a copy. I'm now not going to play the Sinful engine, even though I already have like £300-400 worth of cards there already. It's just absolutely insane. Like when you can build, technically, in my opinion, you could build the budget Snake Eyes version, the Dogmatica version, and the Tribrigade version for the same price as possibly one Wanted and one Witch, which is absolutely crazy. Carrying on with the Fire King cards, of course, we do play triple Sanctuary and double Fire King Island. Obviously, Sanctuary is another good target you could send off of the back of the original Sinful Spoils, and that's really if you've opened up Sanctuary and you need to get to Ponix, and then Ponix can ultimately end you getting you a Fire King Skyburn or a Circle of the Fire Kings. You don't have to play Circle of the Fire Kings. I just quite like the idea because, again, it's another way of being able to dodge targeted protection, and it lets you bring back any fire monster from the graveyard. So if I was to go, for example, Fractal, send Kit, send Nerval, Nerval search, and then I went normal summon Ponix because I already opened it up, and my opponent went Imperm or Veiler, I could then go, cool, change Circle, get rid of the Ponix, bring back a Kit, or bring back a Fractal, and not only do I get the search off the back of the Ponix to give me Fire King Skyburn, but I then also have the ability to trigger the Ponix in order for it to come back during the next standby phase, and I've been able to get a Tribrigade monster on the board, which will have at least two options in the graveyard to get me into a Ferrijit, which will allow me to then just special summon the Tribrigade monster that I searched off of Nerval from the hand without needing another discard. Now, obviously, Circle is only at 1 in the deck, so it's very rare that you're going to open it up and it's going to happen that way. But it's just something to kind of keep in the mind that it's worth having, in my opinion. And then to try and deal with Draw Unlock Bird, we've got the 1 Call by the Grave and the 1 Instant Fusion. Like I've said before, in most of my decks that I'm playing are around about 40 cards. I feel that trying to max out on the options to deal with Droll if your local environment is absolutely rampant with that card is to play Instant Fusion and Call By, because in my opinion, Instant Fusion counts as a second copy of Call By because it gets you to Millennium Restrict, which allows you to deal with such cards. On top of that, especially when you're playing cards like Tenki as well, there are just so many different routes that you can get hit with Draw Unlock Bird, and it really does hurt your turn. That's the difference when you are putting £300 to £400 in the deck for the Snake Eyes version, or the Sinful version to be specifically correct, because you're able to kind of play around Draw Unlock Bird, you're able to play around more hand traps, you're able to still present a board without your opponent being able to interact you or lock you down. Moving on to the hand traps, I've got the 1 DD Crow as it is searchable. Like if I've already got my Ponix in play and I go through the Shurag into Zelantis play, I can search out a DD Crow. And like I've already said, DD Crow is actually really good in this format, in my opinion. A lot of people are playing Bestials, which are absolutely fine. But one thing that DD Crow has above the Bestials is it can target any card in the graveyard. And that's going to give you the ability to stop the Fire King loops. It's also going to give you the ability to banish any spells and traps that might have recursion. Stuff like the Labyrinth matchup as well. This can be very important. And if you wanted to make it more featured, you can bump it up to 2, if not 3. Then, of course, we do play triple Ash Blossom and triple Infinite Impermanence. Pretty straightforward and simple on these ones. These are, like, in my opinion, 2 of the best hand traps of the format. Just 2 of the best hand traps in general outright. You can, of course, main deck Draw Unlock Bird if you want to. Draw Unlock Bird is currently in the side, and when I go through the side deck, you'll see that if your environment is very weak to Draw Unlock Birds, you can main them. If your environment, they do not play around Nib game 1, then you can very easily main them. The best thing about a deck like this as well is when you're considering a card like Nibiru, you don't really present such a huge monster-related board. Yes, of course, through the Tribrigade, you'll end up on stuff like a Appaloosa, the ability of revolt into Shurag and everything else. But if your opponent baits out the Appaloosa and then they're trying to kill the Appaloosa and they think, yeah, cool, I'm safe, I'm going to build up my board then after the Appaloosa, you can then still nib them, and then you'll still have the ability to revolt and go into a Shurag to get rid of the nib token so that you don't need to worry about that. Straight away, your Shurag plus the nib going indirect will going to be about 6,000 damage, not to mention the Tribrigade card you would have already added back. So if you end up getting to a Fractile, normal summon a Fractile, straight away, that's another 19. All you need to do is get another 100 damage on board, and you've OTK'd through that particular type of play. And the last card, of course, is the one Revolt. Like, this card is such a crazy card for just in general. Like, it's such a good trap card. But to be able to recycle your banished and or graveyard monsters, well, specifically Tribrigades, and then go into a Shurag is very, very important, because that gives you a way to chain block your Shurag. It also gives you the ability to non-target banish a card, and then on top of that, you're going to gain back resource and everything else on top of it. So again, that's another reason why a lot of people are playing Ghost Bell, or I'm seeing Ghost Bell in some particular type of builds. It really comes down to you. If your local environment or the environment you're taking it to is Tribrigade heavy, then of course Ghost Bell might be a little bit more effective. But if it's not, I still feel that DD Crow is probably a lot better, just because it will hit more scenarios and it can't be chain blocked because it targets, whereas Ghost Bell has to happen exactly after that card uses its effect. Moving on to the extra deck, so of course we'll start off with the XYZs. We're only playing two, so we're playing the one Garunix Eternity and the one Ding. I just think that Ding is such a good card for a deck like this that can spawn out rank 8s quite easily, because if I've already gone through the Eternity during my opponent's turn to nuke up the board, I can then go into Ding. Ding also gives you protection from your Fire King Island, so if they do destroy the Fire King Island, you can protect through Ding if they are successful to get rid of it. But if they can't get through that Fire King Island because you're constantly protecting the Fire King Island with Ding as well, you're in a very good position. Not to mention, in the mirror match, summoning out Ding, sending their Fire King Island can be detrimental to them. Then, of course, moving on to the one fusion monster, which is the Millenniumizer Strict. Pretty straightforward and simple on that one. And then moving through into the Link monsters. So for our Link ones, pretty standard on this. I think you would play these line up on the majority of builds you're going with. So you'd always play Almirage. But then it's up to you whether you play Anma and Link Karibo, or if you play one or the other. There's space in the extra deck for the moment, and the best thing is, once I've utilised the Millenniumize Restrict, if I'm worried about a card like Nibiru, of course I can then use Millenniumize before it gets destroyed in the end phase to go into any of these. Or of course I can instant fusion into Millenniumize into Relinquish Anima, steal one of my opponent's monsters, or try and bait out a form of interaction. Then for the Link 2s, we've got the one Heat of the Fire Charmer, the one Pit Knight. Like, you don't have to play this. I just really like its applications within this deck. The fact that I can have Pit Knight, summon down Garunix Eternity triggers its effect to destroy the entire board or destroy all the monsters on the board except itself, and then I can chain Pit Knight early to negate one of my opponent's monster effects that may have the ability to try and stop one of my cards. I can chain block my Eternity as well in that sense, and if that opponent's monster can't be destroyed by battle or card effect, again it's a way of being able to negate its effect so that I can complete the board nuke, and then Pit Knight is going to come back the next turn anyway. Then of course we do for the Tribrigades, one Ferrijit, the one Berbrum, and then of course the two Shurags. Pretty straightforward and simple on that one. And then the card you're going to be turning your Shurag into turn 0 in order to get you into your Yourponics will be your World Sea Dragon Zelantis, because the idea is you would go into Shurag through one of your Tribrigade monsters, and you would turn Shurag into Zelantis. As long as you've got one banished Wing Beast or one banished Tri-type, you then get the ability to search out your Yourponics, and you can pretty much do that without your normal summon, but even if you do go through your normal summon, you'll still have the ability to get to a Yourponics or a DD Crow. Then the final cards I'm going to show you is entirely up to you on what you want to play. So for me personally, right now, I am trialing out Appaloosa and the Desperate Doom Eagle. The reason I've gone with Desperate Doom Eagle is because it has that quick effect ability, which technically acts like a DD Crow in the form of being able to disrupt my opponent's graveyard. As a quick effect, during my turn, I can put one of their cards back into the deck, and then during their turn, I can put one of their cards in the graveyard back into the deck as well. So it allows me to play around the standby phase loop effects, and it also lets me play around the end phase effects or floating effects or anything else like that. If you don't want to play Doom Eagle, you do have the ability to play Ancient Warrior, Oath, Double Dragon Lords. I just feel Doom Eagle has that ability for a very balanced go first, go second, whereas Ancient Warrior, by the time you make it, yes, it can be good if you make it go second, but it's probably better as a form of interruption if you make it going first. And the route of play within this deck, it doesn't need to rely on either of these, so they are flex spots. The other options that you can play as well is IP Masquerena, and when you are playing IP Masquerena, the one card that I would highly advise you playing is Nightmare Unicorn, because the idea is you'd go IP into Unicorn. If budget is not a matter, then of course you'd already be playing the sinful version of this deck, and then you would definitely be having SP Little Knight. But the idea is that with your targets, if you do put IP in here, IP's targets will be Appaloosa and Unicorn. But if you're not playing this because it's like a 10 to 15 pound card and you want to keep it on a much tighter budget, you'd ultimately end up cutting the Appaloosa. You can still put in your Unicorn as a form of disruption going second, or going first or second. And then, of course, you can just play these two if you wanted to keep the budget at a bare minimum. I just think they're really kind of good cards for the engine, depending on what budget you're working with. So that's it for the entire main deck, and of course the extra deck. Just kind of showing you, I would say like the Tribrigade extra deck is pretty staple. It's kind of how it works. Moving on to the extra deck, of course. So for the extra deck, side deck, double Prankertops. I just think it's a great card for going second, being able to disrupt your opponent. And as I mentioned before, it's basically just a free boss monster that can then bait out forms of interaction, can deal with cards like SP Little Knight. Unfortunately, it's not strong enough to deal with a Baron, but it will be able to bait out the Baron Negate, because you can special summon down Prankertops, go to battle phase, kill one of your opponent's monsters, and then attempt to use Prankertops' effect to get rid of Baron, and ultimately they're forced to use Baron's Negate on the Prankertops. So. And then, of course, we've got 2 Nibiru. You can play this at 3 if you want to, but I'm going to show you a bit more of a range from the extra deck, just so you have a bit of an idea. Triple Dark Lockbird, just, again, format dependent on that one. Triple Dark Ruler No More. Like, being able to activate Dark Ruler No More and then make Runic's Eternity is incredibly powerful. It's basically like making a Raigeki off of the back of like a Dark Ruler Raigeki kind of play, which is really kind of cool. And if you then have the ability to pop the Runic's Eternity, you can bring more monsters back to the board. But ultimately, as long as you're clearing off all of your opponent's monsters, you're then just going to want to try and control the board from that point on. The best thing about the Runic's Eternity is you activate Dark Ruler No More, turn off the monster effect, summon Eternity, destroy the entire board. Then you can use Eternity's second effect to pop one of the back row cards, and that can be very, very important. And then, of course, we do play Lightning Storms and Dusters. Cosmic Cyclones are also very optional for you guys as well. If you have them, you can put them in. It gives you a couple of different options as well. And then the other kind of card to mention will be something like Evenly Matched. Now, you adapt this side deck for your local environment. I'm just, again, as I've shown you in my previous ones, I'm showing you kind of examples of what you'd be working with. So you're working with board wipe capabilities in the form of Evenly Matched. You're then working with back row hate in the form of Dusters and Lightning Storms. You're then working on with out-and-out board negators with the form of Dark Ruler No More, which only goes in if your opponent is specifically not going into game 3, because you won't be able to do any damage to them, and you're basically giving them another turn to live or push for a draw. But the idea behind Dark Ruler No More is if you put that on there and your opponent's boards they cannot be destroyed, you then need to play it a little bit more carefully. Now, obviously, I've shown you 17 cards here for the extra deck. It's entirely up to you to adapt which one of these cards is going to be less effective for you, and which one of these cards you're going to want to possibly cut down to 3. Cut down to 2, cut down to 3. But then you also have the ability, should you want to consider other cards like Kaijus if you are more of a tighter budget and your opponent or your local environment are putting on indestructible tower monsters. Obviously, Kaijus came in the structure deck. You can very easily, if Draw Not Bird is non-effective at your local environment, very, very rare, you can cut that out completely. Dark Ruler could be a 2 of if you want to. If you wanted to play Cosmic Cyclone because you don't have Lightning Storms, you can put in 2 Cosmic Cyclones and cut the Harpy's Feather Duster. If you're not a fan of Evenly Matched, you can either cut that to 2 or cut that out completely. You just have loads of different flex options that you will adapt to your local environment to make it as effective as possible. Like if your local environment do not fear Nib at all, because they're always, the decks that are being played always either play through a Nib or set up that negate before a Nib is effective, then you don't even need to play it at all. The best thing about Nib is it's one of them ones where a local environment, they feel like, oh, I've never seen Nib, or I haven't seen Nib for absolutely ages, maybe no one's playing it, and they start getting a little bit lapsical and start playing into a Nib. So if you become the first one to bring Nib back into your local environment and they're not expecting it and they're just playing for it because they haven't seen it for a while, you just go Nib, and on its own, sometimes Nib just wins you a game outright, which is absolutely insane. So that is pretty much it for the main, extra, and the side, to give you an idea of how you can build it, put it together, change it up, and everything else. Obviously, what you'd be looking for is if you are putting in Dark Ruler No More, I would still keep in Revolt. If you're not putting in Dark Ruler No More and your plan is to play stuff like the Birus to kind of OTK and then move the board from there, then you'd keep Revolt in. Revolt is a very easy side-out target if you're also going for something. If you're keeping it evenly matched as well, keep in Revolt, because the idea is you want to break your opponent's board and then build your own that they can't break back. Obviously, Imperms and Ashvis and DD Crows are all pretty straightforward and simple, but if your matchups, they don't like fall to those cards at all and they have like little to no effect, then they're very easy side outs. And then it really comes down to your personal preference. Like, if you are not liking the original Sinful Spoils, those can come out quite easily. If you want to cut down the 10 keys to 2, you can do. You can cut down the Tribrigade engine if you want to. Other than that, the rest of the deck is pretty solid and packed tight. You just need to adapt it to the environment you're going into. Like, if you know the environment is going into and everyone is playing triple draw and Lockbird, then maybe you just cut the original Sinful Spoils and the Fire Formation 10 key engine completely. Or if you cut out the 10 keys, that's where you can still play the 3 original Sinful Spoils, and you would end up just playing your Snake Eyes, Birch, and Ash. Yes, you would ultimately run into Droll off the back of your Snake Eyes Ash, or Ponix off of the back of your original Sinful Spoils, but by that point you already have the resources that you need in order to set up your Flameberg, in order to go into something like a Decode Talker Heat Soul, draw more cards, get into your hand traps, make sure that your hand traps are enough to beat the crackback that your opponent is going to attempt to put into place, and then work it from there. So I hope this has given you a couple of ideas on the update of the build. Like I said, not a lot has really changed for the Tribrigade lineup. It's just kind of become more fine-tuned with everything that it plays. The route of play is exactly the same as it has been before. Like, your Tribrigade is ultimately ending to get to Shurag to get you to Ponix, or if you already have that, you're going to ideally be pushing into get into a Revolt more times than not. Like, no matter whether you've got Ponix or not, you're always going to go for a Revolt because the card's just cracked good. So yeah. That is pretty much it. Like I said at the start of the video, if you want to see an updated budget Dogmatica build for this deck, get a video above 50 likes and I will bring that for you shortly. Obviously next week is when Maze of Memory, or Maze of Illusion, I believe it's called. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what it's called. Is Maze of Millennia, I think it is due out next week. So we'll be looking at doing some other updates with that. I'm not really going to focus too much on Bonfire just yet. Like, I think the price of it is a little bit too high, but I do like the idea of Flame Swordsman and everything else in between. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. Till next time, as absolutely always, stay safe, and of course, happy dueling.